You don't get to walk in here, dressed like that, and pretend you earned something." The words dropped like stones, cold, heavy, and coated in contempt. Corporal Isaiah Tillman stood motionless in the marble lobby of the Veterans Recognition Hall of Honor in Atlanta. He wasn't in dress uniform. He didn't need to be. Just slacks, a windbreaker zipped up to his chest, and a ball cap stitched with 4 faded words: 173rd Airborne, Da Nang. He had come to see a display, a new one, they said. Something about forgotten valor. He had no idea his name would be on the list. But before he could even read the plaque, a man blocked his path. Colonel Bennett Weston, retired, white, polished, and staring at Isaiah like he was a trespasser in his own house. "You need an appointment," Weston sneered. "This area's for guests of honor and family, not wanderers." Isaiah's hand tightened on the cane he didn't want to be holding. "I was invited." "I doubt that. This area's for those who earned citations, those with their names carved in stone, not men who were removed from service." Isaiah said nothing. He just blinked, because 30 feet behind Weston, on a gleaming panel of etched brass, was a name: Tillman, I.L. Operation Fire Crest, heroism under hostile fire. Recommendation, Silver Star. Isaiah had never seen it before, never knew it existed, because he'd never been told. 37 years earlier, that same name had appeared in a report written by 2 officers who never spoke of it again. Operation Fire Crest had gone sideways. A recon team deep in hostile jungle, under fire, with 2 wounded and no comms. The official report said extraction under duress. The truth? Isaiah had carried 1 man on his back and dragged another with a torn web belt while returning fire for over 2 hours, then set up a perimeter, then waited through the monsoon for evac. The commanding officer never wrote the medal citation. He disappeared from the records 6 weeks later. The other witness? KIA before his affidavit could be filed. All that remained was 1 memo, 1 field commendation draft, and Isaiah's discharge papers marked early separation due to psychological reassessment. Back in the lobby, Isaiah steadied his breath. "I didn't come here for a medal. I came because they told me my story was finally being told." Weston crossed his arms. "Who's they?" Isaiah slowly pulled a folded letter from his jacket. On the header, Office of the Georgia Veterans Valor Initiative. Signed by Director Helen Dupre. Weston scanned it, then grunted. "That woman's soft. She's been letting all kinds of people into these programs. This citation isn't official." Isaiah took a slow step forward, cane tapping the floor. "Read the fine print." Weston frowned. Isaiah's name had been submitted for the Silver Star in 1986. The recommendation had been blocked, not denied, by a superior officer under review for misconduct. When the officer was dishonorably discharged, the paperwork vanished. It had been rediscovered 2 years ago by a graduate student in military ethics, digging through declassified files for a thesis on forgotten acts of valor. Elsewhere in the building, Helen Dupre's phone buzzed. "Mr. Tillman's here," she said, surprised. "He finally came." A staffer replied, "Weston's with him. He tried to block him at the display." Helen stood up so fast her chair hit the wall. "Keep him there. I'm coming." In D.C., Colonel Emory Norris, now retired, reviewed a report on the Valor Initiative's desk. Tillman's name glared from the header like a wound never closed. Norris had served under the same chain of command that scrubbed Isaiah's file. He remembered the rumors, the whispers, disobedient, unstable, acted without orders. But then he'd read the mission log and seen what Isaiah really did. He wasn't unstable. He was abandoned, Norris said out loud. Back in Atlanta, Weston finally moved aside, begrudgingly, as Helen arrived, flanked by 2 aides. "Colonel Weston," she said curtly, "you're out of line. I'm protecting the sanctity of this hall. No, you're protecting a version of history that's comfortable to you." She turned to Isaiah. "Mr. Tillman, would you come with me?" Isaiah followed her through the inner exhibit, past the polished bronze and framed citations, until they reached a newly dedicated wall titled, "The Ones We Never Thanked." There, beneath the single spotlight, was a glass case. Inside, a replica of the Silver Star, a printout of the original field citation, and a black-and-white photo of a young man, barely 20, lifting a wounded comrade onto his shoulders. Isaiah stared. He reached one hand out, but stopped short of touching the glass. "Why now?" he asked, voice hoarse. Helen's eyes softened. "Because someone finally found the truth, and someone else had the courage to let it see daylight." Isaiah exhaled. "Took them long enough."
"I'm not putting that on." Isaiah stood in front of the full-length mirror in the back room of the hall, staring at the dark blue blazer laid neatly on the table. A Silver Star medal rested inside a velvet box, opened, untouched. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, not from fear, but from everything this small box represented. Helen Dupree stood nearby, gently placing a lapel pin on her own jacket. "You don't have to wear it," she said softly. "This isn't about pageantry." "Good," Isaiah muttered, "because I didn't bleed for ceremony." The press conference was scheduled for noon. Local papers, a few cameras, no national attention yet. But whispers were starting to spread online, especially in veterans forums where the phrase "valor lost, honor restored" was gaining traction. The story of a forgotten soldier whose Silver Star nomination had been erased was drawing fire and sympathy. A few talking heads on AM radio were already stirring things up. Why give medals to people discharged for mental instability? If he was a real hero, why'd he get sent home early? Isaiah knew the game. Same tune, new verses. At exactly 11:52 a.m., his granddaughter, Jasmine, burst through the side door of the recognition hall. "Grandpa," she whispered loudly, trying not to interrupt the setup in the next room. "Grandpa, you made the news!" Isaiah raised an eyebrow. She showed him her phone. There, on the screen, was his picture, the young version of him, from the glass display, beside bold letters. "Silver Star Hero, hidden for 37 years. And beneath that, "Why did the Pentagon forget Isaiah Tillman?" In a quiet office at the Department of Defense, a retired general scrolled through the same article, his jaw tightening. General Rayburn had commanded the Southeast Division during the latter years of the Cold War. He had signed off on hundreds of citations, and buried a few too. When Isaiah's name resurfaced, his pulse jumped. He remembered that mission. He remembered that file. And he remembered the voice on the other end of a secure line ordering the suppression of certain racially complicated cases due to ongoing policy concerns. Now that buried order was a ghost clawing at his legacy.
Meanwhile, in a small room behind the main stage, Isaiah was still staring at the box. "You know," he finally said, "they sent me home with a bill." Helen looked up. "What?" "Medical evac, jungle extraction, and 3 weeks at the VA psych ward. Said my insurance didn't cover it all. I owed Uncle Sam $627.43. Helen closed her eyes. "And did you pay it?" He nodded. "Worked it off cleaning mail trucks for 2 years. A long pause passed. "I wish I could undo that," she whispered. "You can't," Isaiah said, "but you can stop it from happening again." The press conference began with a brief speech from Helen. She detailed Isaiah's actions, the buried commendation, and the rediscovery of his nomination. She thanked the graduate student, the archivist, the senators who helped push for recognition. And then she gestured to Isaiah. The cameras turned. He walked slowly but steady to the podium. He didn't read a speech, didn't quote any documents. He just looked at the crowd and said, "I never fought for medals. I fought because the men next to me needed someone who wouldn't run. They never ran, and neither did I." The room fell silent. Then applause, real, raw, and from the heart. After the conference, a man in uniform approached. He was young, black, clean-shaven, with the insignia of an Army major on his shoulder. "Sir," he said, straightening his posture, "my name is Major Deshaun Butler. I serve in the same unit you once did, 173rd Airborne. I just wanted to shake your hand." Isaiah nodded, taking the offered hand. "I read about what you did. I'm training my guys now. They need to know this history. They need to know about you." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Then tell it better than they told mine." That night at home, Jasmine sat beside him on the porch, watching the fireflies blink over the grass. "You're going to be in a textbook, Grandpa." He chuckled. "Is that right?" "Yep. My history teacher said our school board is adding a section next year called Buried Heroes. They're starting with you." Isaiah stared out into the trees. They should have started with the ones who never made it back. Jasmine was quiet. Then she asked, "Do you wish it had gone differently?" He paused. "I wish it had been seen. I wish I hadn't had to wait. But I'm still here. That counts for something." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "It counts for everything." The Pentagon doesn't like ghosts, especially not the kind that come wrapped in commendations once buried, names once erased, and stories that never made it to public records. When the Isaiah Tillman story hit major syndicates, the Veterans Committee in D.C. called an emergency closed-door meeting. 7 senators, 4 generals, 1 civilian historian. They passed around a single red folder, stamped Re-examination, Classified Veteran Files, 1974 to 1989. Page 4 listed over 219 servicemen who had either been denied medals, misclassified, or forcefully discharged under codes like Section 12A, Behavioral Misconduct, or Lack of Cohesion. But half those files carried another code, RI, meaning Racial Interference. It wasn't a law, it was a quiet instruction. Don't elevate what might complicate. Isaiah had never heard those letters before, but when Helen visited his house the next week with a flash drive, she showed him the scans. "Your discharge was coded with a note," she said. "It wasn't about instability." She turned the screen toward him. "Combat heroism verified. Recommend suppression due to race political tension. Discharge to avoid media complication." Isaiah stared at it for a long time. Then he laughed bitterly. They didn't just forget me. They buried me on purpose. The national attention grew. News anchors demanded an investigation. Military brass scrambled. Old files surfaced. But more than that, other names emerged. Private Alan Royce, who pulled 3 men from a burning tank in 1975, had been discharged with no mention of bravery. Corporal Janice Hughes, a black female soldier, wounded in combat and sent home without ceremony. Sergeant Omar Daniels, awarded in country, but whose medal was lost in transit. Isaiah read every name, every detail. He took notes. He remembered faces. And then he did something he hadn't done in 40 years. He went back to Fort Bragg. The base looked different, cleaner, sharper, but the weight in the air was the same. He stood on the parade field, watching a new class of soldiers practicing drills. A young drill sergeant noticed him and jogged over. "You lost, sir?" "Nah, just remembering." The sergeant tilted his head. "You serve?" 17th 3rd, Denying. "Damn, I've read about you. You're Tillman." Isaiah nodded. "Sir," the man said, Would you speak to our platoon?" Isaiah hesitated. "Then, only if they're ready to hear something that might hurt." Inside the rec room, 20 young soldiers sat in full attention. Isaiah stood with his cane. No medals, no uniform, just truth. He didn't shout. He didn't preach. He told them what it felt like to be erased, what it meant to carry others out of hell and come back to silence. And when he was done, one soldier, a Latino kid from El Paso, stood and said, "Sir, if they won't hang your medal in the Hall of Honor, we'll hang it in ours." The room clapped, and Isaiah, for the first time, felt it land. Meanwhile, in Washington, pressure mounted. A joint bill was introduced, the Valor Restoration Act. Its aim, audit and restore over 200 cases where valor was denied or suppressed due to discrimination. And at its heart, Isaiah's name. Senator Kim from New York said it plainly on the Senate floor. He didn't need a medal. We needed to give it, because honor delayed is honor denied. On a rainy afternoon 6 weeks later, Isaiah stood once again at the Hall of Honor. But this time, it was different. There was a ceremony, a real one. The silver star pinned not behind glass, but to his chest. The citation read aloud, his full service record restored, his discharge code corrected, and at the end, as the flag was folded and handed to him, for sacrifice rendered and delayed dignity restored, Isaiah didn't cry. He just whispered, "You took your time, but I'm still standing." As the crowd dispersed, Helen Dupree walked up. "We're naming the next exhibit after you," she said, "but I know you don't care." Isaiah smiled. "No, I don't." She paused. "But we're also naming a scholarship for kids of soldiers who got lost in the system. We're calling it the Tillman Truth Fund." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Now that matters." That night, Jasmine filmed a short video of her grandfather. He sat on the porch, medal beside him, holding an old photo of his unit. In the clip, he says, "I didn't come back to be remembered. I came back so others wouldn't be forgotten." The video went viral. It wasn't flashy. It was real. "You're not gonna like this." Helen's voice on the phone wasn't uncertain. It was weary. It carried the tone of someone who'd fought too long in the dark and just discovered the shadows were deeper than she thought. Isaiah put the call on speaker and set it next to the tarnished velvet box on his kitchen table. "What is it this time?" he asked, stirring his tea. "There's a defense contractor, Corvus Strategic. They're trying to have your story discredited.
They've pushed a memo to 3 networks calling your operation unverified and claiming your records were reconstructed using unreliable data. Isaiah didn't blink. Corvus Strategic. Helen sighed. They bought out Phoenix Holdings in the 90s. You know what that means? Isaiah's spoon stopped mid-stir. Phoenix Holdings, the same private partner that had co-funded Isaiah's original deployment, the same firm that had operated as shadow cover for the State Department in Southeast Asia during the early 80s, the same one that made millions from proxy warfare and then vanished from public record. They weren't just rewriting history, they were erasing the receipts. 3 days later, Isaiah received an anonymous envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, 2 documents. One was a copy of his original mission log, signed by then-Major Rupert Krantz of Phoenix Holdings. The second was a legal contract dated August 9, 1982, between Phoenix and the Department of Defense, stating all field reports would be property of the private firm in perpetuity unless legally challenged. At the bottom, in faded red ink, "Top secret, destroy after read." Isaiah exhaled through his nose. Well, guess someone forgot to shred. Helen wasted no time. She called in her contact at the Veteran Legal Alliance, a former JAG officer named Leon Dandridge. Within 48 hours, they filed an injunction in federal court to unseal all records related to Phoenix Holdings operations involving black and minority soldiers. The filing made national news. So did the retaliation. Helen's office was broken into. Leon's phone was tapped. An investigative journalist covering the case lost his access to Pentagon archives pending internal review. The system wasn't just resisting, it was fighting back. Meanwhile, Isaiah received a visitor. Not from the military, not from Congress, but from an unlikely ally. Major Deshaun Butler, the same officer who had thanked him weeks before. I had to do this off the record. They told me to back off, but I can't. He handed Isaiah a flash drive. What's on it? Isaiah asked. Audio logs, testimonies. I've been collecting stories from soldiers whose service was buried or erased. Your story isn't the only one. It's one of hundreds. Isaiah held the tiny device like it was radioactive. Why me? Because, Butler said, you were the first one to speak up and not flinch. That night, Isaiah and Jasmine sat in front of an old laptop, playing the files one by one. A voice from 1979, recorded from a field radio. Requesting evac for Sergeant Mendez. He took shrapnel shielding a civilian school from mortar fire. We'll hold the line. A female voice from 1984. They told me if I pushed for a medal, I'd lose my promotion. I pushed anyway. Never got either. A trembling voice from 1991. I watched my friend die. He got nothing. No name on a wall, no ceremony, nothing. Isaiah didn't cry, but Jasmine did. She whispered, Grandpa, this can't stay hidden. Isaiah nodded. Then we won't let it. Isaiah went back on the road. He visited 4 states in 3 weeks, speaking at schools, town halls, VFW posts, and churches. Wherever he went, crowds gathered, not just to hear about his medal, but about the others, the voices, the forgotten, the silenced. And with each stop, someone would come up with a name. My uncle served in '72. They said he had a disciplinary issue, but he saved a platoon. My mom was a medic, never got recognized because they said women weren't in combat, but she was. The floodgates were opening. And this time, Isaiah wasn't standing alone. By the time Helen appeared before the House Subcommittee on Military Records in late August, she carried with her over 127 testimonials and a petition signed by 92,000 Americans. And in her opening statement, she said,
This isn't about rewriting history. It's about finishing the sentences we never allowed to be spoken. The committee chair, Representative Mason, paused for a long time after. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Ms. Dupree, do you believe the government intentionally suppressed these acts of valor?" Helen didn't hesitate. "I don't believe it. I know it, and I've got the paper trail to prove it." Outside the hearing room, Isaiah was approached by a reporter. "Mr. Tillman, do you want an apology from the Pentagon?" Isaiah smiled, tired but proud. "I want a change. I don't need a 'we're sorry.' I want a 'we fixed it.' When I hear that, then we'll talk." The wind was sharp that morning at Arlington. Rows of white headstones stood like silent witnesses as Isaiah Tillman walked between them, his silver star pinned firmly to his lapel. In one hand, he carried a folded American flag. In the other, a single photograph. 5 men, smiling in the sun, jungle behind them. 2 never came back. The other 3, lost to obscurity. Today, they would finally be named. The Department of Defense had made the announcement just 1 week prior. Effective immediately, the records of 214 veterans whose honors were delayed or denied due to internal bias are hereby restored. Their full citations will be entered into the National Valor Archive, and posthumous commendations will be delivered to next of kin. Isaiah had read those words again and again. They didn't make things right, but they made them real. Jasmine stood beside him, her phone in hand. She had been filming everything, this time not for the news, but for legacy. "This is the spot?" she asked. Isaiah nodded. "Section 60, row 9, marker 1132. He knelt slowly, joints stiff, but heart steady. Laid the photo down, pressed the flag against the grass, then whispered each name. Sergeant Malik Ford, Private Aaron Vance, Corporal Tim Shaw, Lieutenant Nathan Bowers, and me, Isaiah Tillman. 5 men, 1 truth. The ceremony was small but official. A color guard stood in formation. A colonel read the citations. The Secretary of the Army handed Isaiah a new medal, not for himself, but on behalf of the 4 brothers who never got theirs. Their names now engraved not in marble, but in memory. Their stories no longer whispered, but recorded, cataloged, taught. Later that evening, back at home, Isaiah sat in his recliner, his cane leaning beside him, the medal resting in its box once more. Jasmine sat on the floor, organizing video clips. "Grandpa, did it feel like victory?" He looked at her, long and quiet. "No, not victory." It felt like breath, like I've been holding mine for 40 years, and today I finally let it out. News stations replayed the ceremony that night, but something else aired too, a mini-documentary called The Valor They Buried, produced by Jasmine herself. It featured Isaiah's testimony, the voice recordings Major Butler collected, Helen's court arguments, and Leon's final summary before the Veteran Legal Alliance. The closing narration? These were not forgotten heroes. They were intentionally erased. But honor is not a gift, it's a truth. And truth, no matter how long it sleeps, will always rise. 3 months later, the first class of recipients for the Tillman Truth Scholarship was announced. 25 students, children and grandchildren of overlooked veterans, received full rides to study history, law, journalism, or public service. One of them, a boy named Micah Ford, gave his acceptance speech with tears in his eyes. "My grandfather never wore a medal, but now I wear his name with pride." Isaiah received letters, hundreds of them, from strangers, from soldiers, from families who had long stopped hoping for justice, but now saw it walking again in old boots with new dignity. One letter stood out. It came from a man named Kenneth Rourke, once a junior officer in Isaiah's old unit. He wrote, "I was there the night you carried 4 men through the mud under sniper fire. I should have spoken up then. I didn't. I was afraid. But I see you now. I see what you never stopped doing. Thank you for being braver than I ever was." Isaiah folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He carried it everywhere after that. One final visit came that winter. Helen, Leon, and Major Butler sat with Isaiah on the porch. The sky was gray, the air sharp. "You started something," Leon said, "and it's not over." "I didn't start it. I just finally said something out loud." Major Butler leaned forward. "We're working on a new commission, permanent, federal. Its mission is to investigate buried valor cases in every decade since World War II. You'll be the honorary chair." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "Honorary?" Helen smiled. "We figured you deserved at least one title you didn't have to fight for." They all laughed. That night, Isaiah stood alone in the backyard. Stars overhead, grass beneath, silence all around. He looked up. Then he whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the 4 he never forgot. "We didn't get parades. We didn't get pages in the books. But we got each other. And now, we got the truth. That's enough." He saluted, and in the stillness of the cold wind, it felt like someone saluted back.